Music theory is no more than the written-out understanding of what we already hear. It's the quantifying, categorizing, the notating of music so that we can collaborate and create on a deeper level. Music existed long before there was even the concept of music theory.
Music was born.
Theory and written notation came later, so that there could be standards. Why? What's the point of standards? Well, like any industry standards, written notation allows us to collaborate. If I write something in D minor,
in D minor, which I always find is really the saddest of all keys, really. I don't know why, but
and give it to another musician to play, it will work out because musicians usually agree what notes make up D minor and what it is supposed to sound like. We all agree on the sound because we have codified the sounds into music symbols that represent the sounds. We then organize the symbols and combine them into specific groups to get the specific sound we are after. The basic symbols that you see in all music are clefs, key signatures, time signatures, the notes themselves, and the bar lines that separate the notes into measures, which organizes the rhythmic structure of the piece. And there goes that word again, organize. Before music theory and standards of notation existed, there was no organization. Everyone just interpreted pieces the way they saw fit because everything was passed around orally, or simply by hearing it and learning the music from someone who already knew how to play it. Along comes music notation and the printing press, and thus music theory is really born once there is an easier way to disseminate music to different people and collaborate with other musicians. With the proliferation of books, composers began to write treatises and manuals about music theory, and like so many things in the Renaissance, music theory saw an explosion of growth and change. Let's start with clefs, since that's how reading sheet music starts. The functional purpose of having different clefs is to keep things nice and neat on our 5-line staff so that it's easier to read and interpret. On the grand staff, we have 2 clefs, treble and bass. Imagine there was no bass clef, and you had to count all the ledger lines to figure out which note this is. And you had to do it in the middle of this piece with all these other notes to read. That ain't happening. Thank goodness for clefs, because it helps my eyes instantly know what note this is. It's G, by the way. Now that I have my clef, I have to decide what key I'm going to be in. Let's choose A flat major because that is the key of this second movement of Beethoven's Pathetique Sonata. These flats over here in these places tell me that this piece is in A flat major because I have B flat, E flat, A flat, and D flat. More on naming in another video, but go with me that it's called A flat. It tells me that every time I see a B, I should play B flat. Every time I see an E, I should play E flat, so forth and so on according to what's in the key signature. If there was no key signature and these flats were just placed next to every single note that needed to be flatted, the piece would look like this. That's a mess. Very hard to read. The key signature makes it much easier visually by telling the performer to just assume these notes are flat unless otherwise stated, like this natural symbol that cancels the flat. The key signature appears on every line in the piece because it can change often, and with accidentals happening, it just helps the musician to remind them what key we are still in or maybe have moved to. The time signature only happens at the beginning or when the time signature changes. The time signature of this movement is 2/4, meaning there are 2 beats in the measure and the quarter note gets the beat. This is the rhythmic organization of the piece. 2 beats in each measure, and you can see the 2 quarter notes often in the bass clef with the bar lines dividing it that way. Now, with all these 16th notes, you might say that this is a fast piece, but there is another important aspect of the piece that we didn't mention at the beginning because it's technically optional, but not really optional, and it's not so black and white as the other components I mentioned. It's the tempo marking, adagio cantabile. This means slow and in a singing style. That's how you know these 16th notes aren't fast. Ah, so nice. The last important piece of vocabulary you need is harmony, or harmonic structure. In other words, what's the chord progression, or progressions? You figure that out by going back to our scale of A flat major. This is called a scale, by the way. It's the notes that are heard as a result of the key that was picked, and numbering this to get some chord names. You have probably heard of 1 chord and 5 chord. This is where it comes from, but a full discussion on those is too big for this 5-minute video. We also left out dynamics, which refers to the loudness and softness of the piece, and you can learn all about those in this video right here.